The sledgehammer was already in mid-swing when I realized my own son was about to break down my door. It was 6:07 in the morning, December 15th, and the sound of wood splintering under metal echoed through my quiet neighborhood like gunshots in a library. My daughter-in-law Vicky screamed my name from the other side, not with concern, not with worry, but with that razor-sharp edge of entitlement that I'd grown too familiar with over the past 3 months. "Rosemary, open this damn door. Who do you think you are? This house is ours." Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell, and let us know where in the world you're watching from in the comments. Now back to my story. I stood there in my bare feet on the cold hardwood floor, my heart hammering so violently against my ribs, I thought it might crack right through. My hands trembled, but not from fear. No, this was something else entirely. This was anger that had been fermenting in the darkness of sleepless nights, anger that had cooled and crystallized into something sharp and unbreakable. I glanced at the antique wall clock Richard had bought 32 years ago at that little shop in Vermont, the one with the hand-carved birds circling the frame. 6:08 now. Attorney Victor Hayes would arrive in exactly 19 minutes. I just needed to hold on a little longer. "Mom," my son Daniel's voice cut through the chaos outside. "I know you're in there. Open the door. I'm not asking anymore." Another crash, metal against wood. The sound of my own child trying to batter his way into the home where I'd raised him, where I'd nursed him through chickenpox and helped him with algebra homework and taught him how to tie a tie for his first job interview. I moved closer to the peephole, my pulse thudding in my temples. Through that tiny glass circle, I could see Daniel gripping a construction sledgehammer, the kind they use to demolish walls. His eyes were bloodshot, face twisted with something I didn't recognize. Beside him stood Vicky, arms crossed over her chest, wearing that smile, that thin, satisfied curve of lips that said she'd already won, that she'd always known she would win. My knees weakened. Was this really how it would end? The same boy I'd cradled against my chest during thunderstorms, the young man who used to call me every Sunday just to hear my voice, now ready to smash through the only thing standing between us. Then I heard it. That deep, authoritative voice behind me, calm as still water. "Let me handle it, Mrs. Coleman." I turned. Attorney Victor Hayes stood in my hallway, dressed in a crisp charcoal suit, leather briefcase in hand, silver hair perfectly combed. He'd arrived early, slipping in through the back door just as we'd planned the night before. "How did you—" I whispered. "Exactly as you asked," he said, his eyes steady and certain. "Through the back entrance. Now it's time they see what they've just lost." My hand found the deadbolt. I could feel the cool metal under my fingertips, could hear my own breathing, shallow and quick. I turned the lock slowly, deliberately. The door swung open. And when Daniel and Vicky saw Victor standing there beside me, eyes like forged steel, briefcase held with the confidence of a man who'd won 1,000 battles in courtrooms across the state, Daniel's sledgehammer slipped from his grasp. It hit the porch with a heavy, final thud that seemed to echo through the morning air. The color drained from both their faces, like someone had pulled a plug, because they knew exactly who that man was. They knew their carefully constructed plan had just collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. But before I explain why I had to change every lock in my house to protect myself from my own son, before I tell you how a 61-year-old widow went from being used and manipulated to standing strong enough to slam the door on her own family, I need you to understand something. I wasn't always this woman. 3 months ago, the Rosemary they knew was just a trusting mother who believed love could fix anything, who thought family meant safety, who never imagined her own flesh and blood, could look at her and see nothing but dollar signs and an obstacle to remove. If you want to know how it got this far, how a mother's love can be weaponized against her, and how even the deepest betrayal can become the catalyst for the most powerful transformation, then stay with me. Because this story might just change how you see family, trust, and the incredible strength it takes to finally say, enough. It started 3 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning that seemed perfectly ordinary. I remember the date clearly, December 12th, because I'd woken up early to visit the farmer's market for fresh chrysanthemums, Richard's favorite flowers. I was planning to take them to Riverside Cemetery, to the plot where my husband had rested for the past 7 years. 7 years of learning to sleep in a bed that felt too big. 7 years of making coffee for one. 7 years of walking through our home at 328 Maple Avenue, hearing only the echo of my own footsteps. I was arranging the flowers in tissue paper when my phone rang. Mom. Daniel's voice sounded strange, strained, like he was forcing words through a tightened throat. Mom, I need to talk to you. Can I come over? It's urgent. Urgent. When your son says that word, your mind immediately spirals to the worst possibilities. An accident, an illness, a death. My chest constricted. Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong? Are you okay? Is it the kids? I need to talk to you in person. I'll be there in an hour. He hung up before I could ask anything else, and I stood there in my kitchen with half-wrapped chrysanthemums and a growing sense of dread pooling in my stomach. 2 hours later, he arrived, but he wasn't alone. Vicky stood beside him in the doorway, wearing a sympathetic smile that I mistook, foolishly, naively mistook, for genuine concern. Behind them were their 2 children, 12-year-old Sophia and 9-year-old Marcus, both carrying overstuffed backpacks that looked like they'd packed for far more than an afternoon visit. Hi, Mom, Vicky said, that smile never quite reaching her eyes. Sorry to just drop by like this unannounced. It's fine, come in. Do you want coffee, water? I can make sandwiches. The children ran straight past me toward the backyard, their laughter breaking the tension for just a moment. Daniel sank onto the living room couch, burying his face in his hands in that nervous gesture he'd had since childhood, the same one he used to do before confessing he'd broken something or failed a test. Mom, he said, his voice cracking, we lost the apartment. The world tilted slightly. Lost it? What do you mean, lost it? Vicky sat beside him, placed her hand on his knee in what I thought was a gesture of support. How naive I was. We ran into some trouble with the bank, she explained, her voice dripping with manufactured sadness. We missed 3 mortgage payments. They repossessed the place. We have 2 weeks to move out completely. My heart clenched. Oh my God, why didn't you tell me sooner? I could have helped. We didn't want to worry you. Mom, Vicky interrupted smoothly. You've already done so much for us over the years. We didn't want to be a burden. A burden. That word should have been my first warning. Daniel looked up, and I saw tears gathering in his eyes. Real tears, or at least tears I believed were real at the time. Mom, I have to ask you for the biggest favor of my life. Can we stay here? Just for 2, maybe 3 months? Just until I find steady work again and we can get back on our feet. I looked around my 4-bedroom house, the house Richard and I had built a life in, where we'd raised Daniel, where every corner held a memory. Since Richard's death, I'd rattled around in rooms that felt too empty, too quiet, too vast for one person. The thought of children's laughter filling the hallways again, of warm meals shared around the dining table, of family energy breathing life back into these walls, it made something in my chest loosen. Of course you can stay, I said without hesitation. Stay as long as you need. This is your home. Vicky jumped up and wrapped her arms around me. Her perfume was expensive, too expensive, I'd realize later, for someone who'd just lost their home, and overwhelming. Thank you, Mom. You have no idea how much this means to us. You're saving our lives. The children cheered when they heard they'd be living with Grandma. Marcus ran over and threw his small arms around my waist. Can I have the room with the stars on the ceiling, Grandma? Please? The room with the stars. The same room Richard had spent an entire weekend painting for Daniel when he was 7 years old, carefully drawing constellations in glow-in-the-dark paint. Orion, the Big Dipper. Cassiopeia, each star placed with such precision and love. Of course, sweetheart, I said, ruffling his hair. That room's been waiting for you. That afternoon, they started moving in, box after box after box carried from a rented moving truck parked in my driveway. The pile in my entryway grew and grew until I could barely walk through without navigating a maze of cardboard and packing tape. "Do you really need all this?" I asked, staring at what looked like their entire household. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. "Well, Mom, we're not sure exactly how long we'll need to stay. Better to have everything here than pay for storage, right?" At the time, it sounded reasonable. At the time, everything they said sounded reasonable. The first week went smoothly, almost beautifully. I cooked family dinners every night, pot roast, chicken parmesan, vegetable lasagna, all Daniel's childhood favorites. The kids did their homework at the dining room table where Daniel used to do his. I helped Sophia with her math problems and read adventure stories to Marcus before bed. Vicky seemed grateful, helpful even, clearing dishes and folding laundry. Daniel went out every day, supposedly job hunting, returning each evening tired but hopeful. It felt like I had a family again. It felt like the house was alive. But then, slowly, subtly, things began to shift. It started with small changes, the kind you almost don't notice at first because they seem insignificant. Vicky began rearranging furniture to make the space roomier, she said. Richard's favorite reading chair, the burgundy leather one where he'd spent every evening with his mystery novels and reading glasses, disappeared from the living room one afternoon while I was out grocery shopping. "Where's the chair?" I asked when I returned. "Oh, I moved it to the garage, Mom," Vicky said breezily, not even looking up from her phone. "It was making the living room look so cluttered and dated. Trust me, it looks much better this way." Dated. That chair was a piece of my life with Richard, of our life together. She replaced the hand-embroidered towels in the bathroom, towels my own mother had made, each one stitched with delicate roses and my initials, with generic store-bought ones in plain colors. "These old towels are too fragile, Mom," she explained, when I found them folded in a box in the hallway closet. "You should modernize a little, update your style." She started cooking too, but meals I didn't recognize. Overly spiced dishes with ingredients I'd never heard of, flavors that felt foreign in my own kitchen. When I prepared the traditional recipes Richard and I had perfected over 41 years of marriage, Vicky sighed dramatically. "So much oil and butter, Mom. Really not good for your health at your age. You have to think about these things." At my age, I was 61, not 90. 2 weeks in, I came downstairs one morning to find the dining room curtains gone. "Vicky," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "where are the French lace curtains?" She glanced up from her coffee. "I took them down. This house needs way more natural light." "Those curtains made everything so dark and gloomy." Those curtains had taken me 3 weeks to sew by hand, 3 weeks of careful stitching, of following the pattern my grandmother had taught me, of embroidering tiny birds along the edges because Richard loved watching the cardinals in our backyard. "But I made those myself," I said quietly. "They took me weeks of work," she shrugged. "Well, they were pretty outdated, Mom. Sometimes you just have to let go of old things and embrace change." Daniel walked in at that moment, kissed his wife on the cheek, and grabbed a piece of toast. "Morning, Mom. Sleep okay?" "Did you see Vicky took down the dining room curtains, the ones I made?" He glanced toward the bare windows and nodded. "Yeah, looks way brighter in here, nicer, more modern. But I spent so much time making them." "They were—" "Mom," he interrupted, his tone gentle but dismissive. "Don't cling to these small things. Vicky's got excellent taste. You should trust her judgment. Change is good." I stood there in my own kitchen, wearing my own robe, drinking coffee from my own mugs, and felt like a stranger. Like I was a guest in someone else's home, tolerated but not truly welcome. "You're right," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "They're just curtains." Vicky smiled, satisfied. "Exactly, Mom. You have to learn to be flexible, adaptable. That's what family does." That night, lying alone in my bedroom, I remembered something Richard used to say to me, usually after someone had taken advantage of my kindness. "Rose," he'd whisper, holding my hand in the darkness. You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known, but someday, someone's going to mistake that kindness for weakness, and when they do, you're going to have to be strong enough to show them the difference. But this was my son, my daughter-in-law, my grandchildren. They wouldn't take advantage of me, would they? I didn't know then that the curtains were just the beginning. I didn't know that Vicky hadn't come to stay temporarily. She'd come with a plan, a calculated, methodical plan to make my house hers, to erase me piece by piece until I disappeared completely and she could step into the space where I used to be. Things truly changed in the 3rd week, and it happened so quietly, I almost didn't notice until it was too late. I was folding laundry in my bedroom one afternoon when Vicky appeared in the doorway, without knocking. Not a gentle tap, not a "Mom, can I come in?" Just suddenly there, standing with her arms crossed, surveying my private space with the calculating eyes of someone appraising property they intended to claim. "Mom," she said, in that syrupy voice she used when she wanted something, "we need to talk about this room." I looked up from the pile of towels. "My room? What about it?" She walked in uninvited, running her manicured fingers across my mahogany vanity, the one Richard had refinished himself 20 years ago. She touched the gold-framed mirror, lingered on the wedding photo hanging on the wall, the one where Richard was carrying me across the threshold of our first apartment, both of us laughing so hard we were nearly in tears. "This space is too cramped," she said, shaking her head with false concern. "Too cluttered with all this old stuff. It's not healthy for you to live surrounded by so much past." I felt something tighten in my chest. "It's not cluttered, Vicky. These are my memories, my life." "Exactly." She turned to face me, and I saw it then, just for a flash, the coldness behind her eyes. "That's the problem, Mom. You're living in the past. You need to let go. Make room for the present. Make room for us." The next day, while I was at my weekly church service, Vicky reorganized the entire living room. When I came home, every single photograph of Richard had vanished from the mantel. Gone. In their place sat 3 vanilla-scented candles and a fake succulent plant in a ceramic pot that still had the price sticker on the bottom. "Where are Richard's photos?" My voice came out smaller than I intended, almost childlike. Vicky looked up from her laptop, utterly unbothered. "I put them in your bedroom closet so they wouldn't get dusty. You're welcome." "I don't care about dust. I want to see them. I want—" "Mom," she interrupted, her tone shifting to that patronizing patience people use with difficult children. "You can't turn the entire house into a shrine. Richard's at peace now. You have to move on. For your own mental health." I opened my bedroom closet with shaking hands and found them there. A cardboard box stuffed with frames, some face down, glass cracked on a few. I searched frantically for my favorite, the one of Richard and me on our honeymoon in California. Standing in the surf at sunset, his arms wrapped around me from behind, both of us squinting into the camera with sun-drunk smiles. It wasn't there. "Vicky," I called out, trying to keep the panic from my voice. "The photo in the silver frame." "Where is it?" She appeared in the doorway. "Oh, that one. The glass was completely shattered and the frame was rusted through. I had to throw it out. It was falling apart anyway." The room seemed to tilt. That photograph was irreplaceable. We'd never gone back to that beach. Richard had died before we could return. "You threw it away?" I whispered. She shrugged. "It was trash, Mom. You need to stop hoarding broken things." That evening, when Daniel came home from another supposedly fruitless job search, I was waiting. I needed him to see what was happening, to remember who I was, who his father had been. "Son, we need to talk." He dropped onto the couch, already pulling out his phone. "Mom, I'm exhausted. Can it wait?" "No, it can't." I sat across from him, hands clasped tight to stop them from trembling. "Vicky's been throwing away your father's belongings. She's changing everything about this house. I feel like a stranger here, Daniel, in my own home." He didn't even look up from his screen. "Mom, Vicky's just trying to help. This house has been stuck in a time warp. Dad's been gone 7 years. You need to move forward. 7 years. As if grief had an expiration date stamped on it like milk in a refrigerator. This is my house, I said, my voice finally finding some strength, and I liked it the way it was. Then maybe that's the problem, he shot back, finally meeting my eyes. You've been stuck for 7 years. Maybe it's time someone pushed you forward whether you like it or not. Vicky's trying to modernize things. You should be grateful she even cares. He went to bed, leaving me alone in a living room that smelled like artificial vanilla, a scent that didn't belong in the home where Richard and I had slow danced to jazz records every Sunday afternoon. That night, I cried. But looking back now, I realized the real pain was still ahead of me, waiting like a predator in the dark. A week later, Vicky came into the kitchen practically glowing with excitement. Mom, I have wonderful news. I hired a professional deep cleaning service. They're coming tomorrow to give this entire house a proper scrubbing, top to bottom, every corner. I looked around at my already clean kitchen. But I clean the house every week. Yes, with old-fashioned methods. She waved her hand dismissively. This place needs industrial-grade cleaning, the kind that really gets into everything. Don't worry about the cost, I'm handling it. 3 uniformed workers arrived the next morning with chemicals, equipment, and an efficiency that felt military. Vicky directed them like a general commanding troops, pointing at this closet, that cabinet, the garage. Box up anything broken or outdated, she instructed. If it looks like junk, it probably is. Wait. I grabbed her arm as they headed toward the garage. That's where I keep Richard's things, his tools, his... Exactly, Mom. A garage full of rusty old tools nobody's touched in 7 years. It's time to clear it out. But that glass cabinet in there belonged to my grandmother. You can't... She sighed, that exasperated sound that made me feel like I was being unreasonable. Fine, keep your precious cabinet, but at least let them clear out the actual junk. Okay? I should have watched more carefully. I should have stood guard. But I was so worn down by then, so tired of fighting every single battle, that I retreated to my bedroom and let them work. That was my terrible mistake. 2 days later, I went looking for Richard's vinyl record collection, 30 years of carefully curated jazz albums. Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald. The same records we'd played every Sunday afternoon when Richard would pull me into his arms in the kitchen and hum softly against my hair, swaying to music only we could hear. The shelf, where they'd always lived, was empty. Vicky. I ran through the house, something close to panic rising in my throat. Where are Richard's records? The vinyl collection? She was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, perfectly calm. Oh, those? Mom, the cleaning crew threw them out. They were all scratched, completely unplayable. It was definitely the right call. Unplayable. I felt like I was suffocating. They were in perfect condition. We played them constantly. They were, past tense. She didn't even look up from her screen. Now you can just stream whatever you want on Spotify. Much more convenient. You should be thanking me for bringing you into the modern age. I sank down right there on the garage floor, in the exact spot where Richard's chair used to sit, where the records had been stacked, where our Sunday afternoon ritual had lived. And I cried harder than I had since his funeral, because it wasn't just about the records. It was about the systematic erasure of everything that proved we'd existed together, that our love had been real, that those 41 years had mattered. Vicky appeared in the doorway, backlit like some dark angel. Mom, don't be so dramatic. They're just things, material possessions. You can't take them with you when you die anyway. But they weren't just things. They were pieces of my soul, fragments of my history, and she was incinerating them one by one. That night, I called my neighbor Clara, the 72-year-old widow who'd become my closest friend since Richard's death. We sat on my porch drinking coffee that had gone cold, and I told her everything. Clara listened with the patience of someone who'd lived long enough to recognize evil when she saw it. Nicole, she said. She was the only one who still called me by my full name. Your daughter-in-law is erasing you. She's systematically wiping away your history so she can rewrite it with herself as the main character. And the worst part? She's doing it under the banner of family, of helping you, which makes you feel guilty for even noticing. That's textbook manipulation. Her words echoed in my mind all night, keeping me awake, forcing me to see what I'd been refusing to acknowledge. The next day, I went to buy groceries. When I returned 2 hours later, my living room walls had been repainted. The soft peach color Richard and I had chosen together 20 years ago, spending an entire weekend testing samples, finally agreeing on the shade that made the room feel warm and alive, was gone. In its place was a dark charcoal gray that made the space feel like a cave. Surprise! Vicky stood in the center of the room, arms spread wide like she was presenting a gift. Isn't it stunning? This color is so trendy right now. Makes the space look so much more sophisticated and elegant. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I know it's a big change, she continued, but trust me, in a few days you won't even remember the old color. This is so much better, modern, contemporary. Daniel walked in, clapping his hands together. Wow, babe, this looks incredible. So much better than before. Vicky's voice dropped into victim mode, the way it always did when she wanted sympathy. Your mom doesn't seem very happy about it. Daniel turned to me, and I saw accusation in his eyes. Really, Mom, Vicky worked all day on this. She's trying so hard to make this house nicer. And you're just complaining about everything she does. I never asked anyone to change anything, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I chose that peach color with your father. We spent a whole weekend painting it together. That was our... It was outdated, Mom, Daniel interrupted. Seriously outdated. The house looked depressing. Now at least it has some style. Depressing. My life with Richard depressing. I went upstairs without another word. I skipped dinner. I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling and realized with absolute clarity that I no longer recognized my own home. The walls, the furniture, the smells. Everything carried Vicky's touch now, her choices, her vision. I was just a ghost, haunting rooms that used to belong to me. But if you think losing my belongings and my memories was the cruelest thing Vicky ever did to me, you're wrong. What came next wasn't about things or paint colors or photographs. What came next was about trust, about exploitation, about the moment I realized my daughter-in-law wasn't just manipulative. She was a thief, and the amount she stole wasn't small. It was Thursday afternoon, January 18th. I remember the date because it would have been Richard's 73rd birthday, if he'd lived. I'd placed a single white rose in a vase on the kitchen counter that morning, a private memorial for the man who'd given me the best years of my life. I went to make tea, trying to calm the unease that had been growing in my chest for weeks, the sensation that I was trapped in my own home with no way out. From the dining room, I heard Vicky on her phone, her voice low but not quite low enough. Yes, I still have the set, she was saying. Antique Chinese porcelain, hand-painted 24-karat gold trim. No, it's not stolen. It's a family piece. 800 is way too low. I need at least 1,000 for the full set. My heart stopped. I moved closer and saw her laptop open, displaying photographs of the porcelain dinner set Richard had given me for our 30th wedding anniversary. He'd bought it in San Francisco during a work trip, had saved for 6 months to afford it. Each plate was hand-painted with delicate cherry blossoms, each cup trimmed with real gold. 12 large plates, 12 small plates, 12 cups with saucers. We'd never used it. It was too precious, too beautiful. I'd kept it in the glass display cabinet just to admire, to remember the way Richard's face had lit up when he presented it to me, so proud of himself for choosing something so perfect. Vicky, my voice came out trembling. What are you doing? She glanced up, completely unruffled, and smiled like we were discussing the weather. Oh, hi, Mom. I'm selling that Chinese dinner set, the one in your cabinet. You're selling my dinner set? The room seemed to spin. That was Richard's gift. You can't sell it. She closed her laptop with deliberate slowness. Mom, be realistic. It's just sitting there collecting dust. Nobody uses it. Nobody even looks at it. Meanwhile, Daniel hasn't found work yet. The kids need school supplies, and we have storage fees due. We need money urgently. If you can't help us financially, we have to manage somehow. Manage by selling my belongings? My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the back of a chair. That set is worth sitting in a cabinet until you die? She interrupted. Is that really what Richard would have wanted? For his grandchildren to go without while you hoard expensive dishes nobody ever eats off of? Each word was a carefully aimed arrow. Cancel that sale, I said, trying to sound firm. Right now. She stood up, and for the first time I saw real anger flash across her face. You know what your problem is, Mom? You're selfish. We take care of you, keep you company so you're not rotting away alone in this big house, and when we need help, just basic help, you refuse. What are you going to do with those plates? Stare at them for another 30 years? That set could feed your grandchildren. But apparently, dead memories are more important than living family. Right then, Daniel walked in carrying a bag of pastries, completely oblivious to the war happening in his own dining room. What's going on? He looked between us. The neighbors can probably hear you too from outside. Vicky transformed instantly, tears appearing in her eyes as if summoned by magic, voice breaking with perfectly performed hurt. Your mom won't let me sell the dinner set. She'd rather watch her grandchildren struggle than part with some old dishes gathering dust. Daniel turned to me, and I saw it. Disappointment, frustration, exhaustion. Mom, seriously? You're making a scene over some plates. They're not just plates, Daniel. They're your father's gift. Dad would rather his grandkids eat than have dishes collecting dust. His voice rose, and I realized with horror that he was shouting at me. Actually shouting. You have no idea how hard things are right now. We're drowning, and you're worried about plates? I stood there, stunned into silence. But don't worry, Mom, he continued, his tone dripping with sarcasm. We won't touch your precious dishes. We'll just pack up and leave so you can live in peace with your stuff. Is that what you want? Vicky began to cry. Real tears this time, or at least tears that looked real. You're right, honey. Let's go. As long as her precious memories are safe, that's all that matters. The kids and I will figure something out. No, wait. I started, but Daniel was already storming upstairs, calling out, Kids, start packing. Grandma doesn't want us here anymore. I heard Sophia's frightened voice from the hallway. What? Why? Because Grandma cares more about old dishes than she cares about us, Daniel responded, loud enough for me to hear every word. For 2 hours, I sat at the kitchen table while the sounds of packing, of Sophia crying, of Marcus asking confused questions echoed through my house. Vicky's performance continued, dramatic sighs, muttered comments about cold-hearted and ungrateful. Finally, Daniel came downstairs alone. He sat across from me, eyes red. Mom, he said quietly, I thought you were different. I thought family mattered to you. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe you're just another selfish old woman who cares more about hoarding possessions than helping her own flesh and blood. Selfish old woman. Those words from my own son. And here's the question I want you to consider. How far would you go to keep peace in your family? What would you sacrifice? Your dignity? Your memories? Your sense of self? Because in that moment I made a choice that would haunt me for weeks to come. Fine, I whispered. Sell it. Daniel's face transformed instantly. He grabbed my hand. Mom, I knew you'd understand. Thank you. Thank you so much. I promise. As soon as I get a decent job, I'll buy you another set. An even nicer one. He ran upstairs shouting, Honey, Mom said yes. We can stay. Within an hour, Vicky had the entire set carefully packed, afraid I might change my mind. That dinner set had been professionally appraised at $4,500 after Richard's death. I'd seen the estate appraiser write that exact number in the documentation. $4,500 for a lifetime of love and sacrifice and partnership. She sold it the next day for $800. When Vicky returned that evening, she was carrying shopping bags. designer brands, expensive boutique names I recognized from window shopping in Manhattan. "You sold it already?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Yes, thank God." She set the bags down on my coffee table. "Now we can finally pay some bills and get the kids what they need." But those bags told a different story. I watched her pull out designer jeans, silk blouses, shoes that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. "Vicky, what is all this?" She glanced up, utterly shameless. "Oh, I found some incredible sales. Buy one, get one free." I couldn't resist. "But don't worry. I paid the storage fees and got the kids their school supplies. This is just a little reward for myself. I've been so stressed lately. I deserved something nice, don't you think?" She walked away humming, while I stood in my gray living room staring at the empty space in my display cabinet. That night, I understood with perfect clarity what Clara had tried to tell me. They hadn't come to stay temporarily. They'd come to take everything. My home, my memories, my money, my dignity, everything was up for grabs. And I'd been letting them do it, one piece at a time, because I was too afraid of being alone to fight back. But Vicky's theft of the dinner set was just practice, just a warm-up for what came next. 2 weeks later, she launched her masterpiece, a con so elaborate, so convincing, that I handed over $12,000 of my own money believing I was saving her life, when in reality, I was funding her vanity. And when I discovered the truth, when I saw what she'd really done with that money, something inside me finally shattered. Not my heart. No, my heart had been breaking slowly for months. What shattered was the last remaining thread of doubt, the final trace of hope that maybe, just maybe, she actually cared about me as family. That thread snapped, and in its place something new began to grow, something cold and clear and absolutely unbreakable. So how does a woman who's been systematically stripped of everything she loves find the strength to fight back? How does someone who's spent months being manipulated, gaslit, and robbed by her own family suddenly become strong enough to turn the tables completely? The answer came on a night I'll never forget, in a moment I wasn't supposed to witness. It was late February, around 11:30 at night. I'd gone downstairs for a glass of water, my mind too restless for sleep, after another day of watching Vicky redecorate my home like it was hers. The house was dark, except for moonlight streaming through the windows Daniel had insisted we leave uncurtained, because natural light is healthier, Mom. As I reached the kitchen, I heard voices drifting from the backyard. Low, conspiratorial whispers that made something in my gut clench with warning. Instinct told me not to turn on any lights, not to make a sound. I pressed myself against the wall near the back door, hidden in shadow, and I listened. "What if it doesn't work?" That was Daniel's voice, anxious, uncertain. "It will work." Vicky's tone was cold, calculating, completely stripped of the sweetness she always used around me. "We just need a few more months to make her completely dependent on us, to make her believe she's weak, old, and needs constant care." My heart began to pound so hard I thought they might hear it through the door. "A few more months for what?" Daniel asked. "To get her to sign the house over to you, obviously. For her own protection, for her own safety, we'll frame it that way. We'll tell her that if something happens to her, if she falls or has a medical emergency, there could be legal complications. We'll make it sound responsible, like we're protecting her interests." I felt the blood drain from my face. "And what if she gets suspicious?" Daniel's voice wavered. "She won't." Vicky laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was nothing like the warm chuckle she used when the grandchildren told jokes. This was sharp, cutting, cruel. "She's lonely, Daniel. We're all she has. And besides, she's already proven how easy she is to control. We threw out her stuff, changed her house, took her money, and she did nothing. She just cried and accepted it. She's weak, and weak people always lose." I had to put my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. "So after she signs," Daniel said slowly, "then what?" There was a pause, the sound of a lighter clicking, the smell of cigarette smoke drifting through the crack in the door. "Then we move her into a nursing home." Vicky said matter-of-factly, like she was discussing where to buy groceries. There are a few outside the city. Bare-bones facilities, maybe $400 a month. Dirt cheap. She'll have a bed, basic food, someone to check on her once a day. That's more than enough at her age. A nursing home. Daniel's voice was barely audible. But she's my mother. And because she's your mother, we're not leaving her on the street, are we? She'll have care. She just doesn't need a 4-bedroom house when we have 2 growing kids who need space. Daniel, this house is worth at least $400,000. Do you understand what we could do with that money? Silence. Then Daniel spoke, and his words felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. We could buy that 3-bedroom apartment you liked, the one near Central Park. Exactly. Vicky's excitement was palpable. And we'd still have money left over to invest, maybe start a business, whatever we want. Your mother doesn't need all this space anymore. She only has the past. We have a future. We have children to raise. And if she refuses to sign, Daniel asked. Vicky's laugh was even colder this time. She won't refuse. By May, she'll be exhausted, drained, scared enough to sign anything just to maintain some connection with us. Trust me, I know women like her. You just have to break them slowly, carefully, until they stop resisting. Once they're broken, they belong to you. You're right. Daniel's voice grew stronger, more confident, and that's when he said the words that killed whatever remained of my maternal love. Moms lived long enough anyway. We deserve this house. Moms lived long enough. From the son I'd carried in my body for 9 months, nursed through every childhood illness, supported through every failure, and celebrated through every success. The boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The young man I'd helped through his first heartbreak. He thought I'd lived long enough. I stood there in the darkness, my entire body trembling, and felt something inside me die. Not my heart. Hearts can heal, can forgive, can hope again. What died was my belief that family meant safety, that blood meant loyalty, that a mother's love would always be returned. Let's go to bed, Vicky said. Tomorrow I'll keep playing the perfect daughter-in-law. It's exhausting pretending to care about her feelings, but it won't be much longer. They laughed together as they walked back toward the house. I barely made it upstairs before they came inside, my legs shaking so badly I had to grip the handrail to keep from falling. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, and something remarkable happened. The weak, trusting, accommodating Rosemary Coleman ceased to exist. In her place, someone new was born, someone who understood that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones most willing to destroy you. I sat up and looked at Richard's photograph on my nightstand. What should I do? I whispered to his image. If you were here, what would you tell me? And then I remembered. A week before Richard died, when the cancer had progressed too far for any more treatments, he'd held my hand in that hospital bed and said something I hadn't understood at the time. Rose, he'd whispered, his voice weak, but his eyes fierce. When I'm gone, there will be people who try to use you, your kindness, your loneliness, your trusting nature. They'll weaponize all of it. Promise me something. Promise me you won't let yourself become a victim. Fight back. Even if you have to fight against your own blood, especially if you have to fight against your own blood. Back then, I'd thought the painkillers were making him paranoid. Now I understood. Richard had known. Somehow, he'd seen what our son might become. I got out of bed and opened the closet, pushing past the boxes of photographs Vicky had shoved to the back. Behind them sat a small safe I'd installed years ago, its combination known only to me. Inside were important documents, the house deed, my will, our marriage certificate, and a business card. I pulled out the card and held it under my bedside lamp. Victor Hayes, attorney, at law, Richard's closest friend, the man who'd helped us navigate every legal matter for over 30 years. Even though it was nearly 3 a.m, I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I woke up and did something that surprised even me. I acted completely normal. I made breakfast, smiled at the grandchildren, asked Daniel about his job search, complimented Vicky's outfit. I played the role of the accommodating mother so perfectly that Vicky actually looked pleased with herself, probably thinking her manipulation had worked even better than planned. But while I scrambled eggs and poured orange juice, my mind was working through a plan. Around 10 o'clock, Vicky came into the kitchen with that concerned expression she wore so well. "Mom, I've been thinking, at your age, you should really start looking into senior care facilities. Not that you need to move right away," she added quickly, "just to have options prepared for when the time comes. It's the responsible thing to do." There it was. The seed they'd discussed in the backyard, now being planted in daylight. "You know what, Vicky?" I said, keeping my voice gentle and agreeable. "You're absolutely right. At 61, I should be planning ahead. That's very wise of you to think of it." Her face lit up with barely concealed triumph. "I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this, Mom. So many elderly people are stubborn about these things." Elderly. I was 61, not 90. "I'm not like other people," I said softly, and smiled in a way she completely misinterpreted. As soon as she went upstairs to shower, I grabbed my phone and stepped into the backyard, making sure I was out of earshot. "Hayes Law Office, how may I help you?" "This is Rosemary Coleman, Ernest Sanders' widow. I need an urgent appointment at your office, not my home, as soon as possible." "Please hold, Mrs. Coleman." 30 seconds felt like 30 minutes. "Mrs. Coleman, Mr. Hayes can see you today at 4 o'clock. Will that work?" "Perfect, thank you." When Daniel came downstairs an hour later, I was putting on my coat. "Where are you going, Mom?" "Doctor's appointment," I lied smoothly, surprising myself with how easily the deception came. "Just a routine checkup. They called to remind me this morning. Do you want me to drive you?" "No, sweetheart. I'm perfectly capable. I'll take a cab." At exactly 4 o'clock, I walked into Victor Hayes' office downtown. His secretary led me into a wood-paneled room lined with law books, where Victor stood to greet me. He was 73 now, white-haired but sharp-eyed, wearing the same type of suit Richard used to wear. "Rosemary." He took both my hands in his. "It's been too long. Richard would be so happy to know you finally came to see me." "Richard asked you to help me if anything happened, didn't he?" Victor nodded slowly. "He did. About 6 months before he passed, he was worried about how vulnerable you'd be afterward, how certain people might take advantage. He made me promise to be available whenever you needed me. So tell me everything." And I did, every detail. The moved furniture, the stolen memories, the sold dinner set, the $12,000 medical scam I hadn't even told you about yet. Yes, that happened too, and I'll explain in a moment. And finally, the conversation I'd overheard in the backyard. Victor listened without interrupting, taking notes in a leather-bound journal. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me with a mixture of sadness and respect. "What your son and daughter-in-law are attempting is called undue influence and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. It's not just unethical, Rosemary. It's criminal. But we'll need solid evidence. I have bank records showing the $12,000. I have photos of the dinner set from before it was sold. I have—" "That's an excellent start," he interrupted gently. "But we need more. We need them to admit their plan in a way that can't be disputed. We need a recording." "A recording?" My heart raced. "How would I? Do you have a small voice recorder or access to one?" I thought of Clara, my neighbor, who'd once mentioned her grandson giving her some kind of recording device. "I think I can get one." "Good. Place it strategically." "Living room, kitchen, wherever they talk freely. We need them to repeat what you heard, their plan to manipulate you into signing over the house, the nursing home scheme, all of it. Once we have that, along with documentation of the financial theft, we can proceed." "Proceed with what?" "With protecting you." He pulled out several documents. "First, we're going to establish an irrevocable living trust. The house will remain in your name, protected by law. You'll have lifetime residence rights. The only beneficiaries will be your grandchildren, and only when they reach age 25. Your son will be completely excluded. Is that legal? Perfectly legal. It's your property. You can designate it however you wish. And once this trust is established, not even a court order can change it without your explicit consent. For the first time in months, I felt something that resembled hope. How long will this take? If you bring me the original deed and sign everything today, I can have it filed and registered within 1 week. But Rosemary, he leaned forward, his voice serious. You must act completely normal at home. If they suspect anything, they might accelerate their plan, and that could complicate everything. I can do that, I said, and I meant it. I left his office with a folder full of documents and instructions, my mind clearer than it had been in months. That evening at dinner, I was the perfect mother and mother-in-law. I asked about everyone's day, laughed at Marcus's jokes, complimented the meal Vicky had cooked, and all the while, I was studying them, seeing them clearly for the first time, not as my family, but as predators who'd mistaken my kindness for weakness. The next day, I visited Clara. I need your help, I told her. That recording device your grandson gave you. Can I borrow it? Clara didn't ask why. She just pulled it from a drawer, showed me how to turn it on and save files, and squeezed my hand. Are you in trouble? I'm finding my way out of it. For the next week, I became someone I never thought I could be. A spy in my own home. I placed that tiny recorder everywhere, tucked behind books in the living room, under the kitchen table during meals, in the backyard near where they liked to smoke and talk. And they kept talking. Oh, how they talked. I captured everything. Vicky discussing how to speed up the timeline, because living with me was unbearable. Daniel worrying that I might get suspicious. Vicky reassuring him that I was too broken to fight back. Their repeated mentions of the $400 nursing home, the Manhattan apartment, the exact plan I'd overheard that first night, now recorded with dates, times, and crystal clear audio. Every night I'd listen to the recordings alone in my room, and each word hardened my resolve a little more. On March 10th, I brought everything to Victor. The recordings, the receipts, the photographs, the timeline of theft and manipulation. He listened to the recordings twice, his expression growing darker. This is more than enough, he finally said. The trust is registered as of yesterday. Your house is protected. Now we set the trap. The trap? We let them think they've won. We give them exactly what they think they want. And when they show their true colors in front of witnesses, we reveal everything. My hands trembled. When? Soon. Very soon. On March 14th, over dinner, I took a deep breath and delivered my performance. You know, I said casually, I've been thinking about what you said, Vicky, about senior care facilities. Maybe you're right. At my age, maintaining this big house is exhausting. Perhaps I should consider moving somewhere smaller, somewhere with support staff, so you and Daniel could stay here with the children. The transformation in Vicky's face was instantaneous, pure, undisguised joy. Oh, Mom, are you serious? Yes. I've even looked at a few places. There's a lovely facility up north. Very comfortable. Daniel grabbed my hand, his eyes actually tearing up. Mom, that's so wise. I'm really proud of you for thinking practically. We'll just need to handle some paperwork, Vicky added quickly. To make the transition smooth, should we call that lawyer friend of Richard's? What was his name? Victor Hayes? I already did, I said. He's coming Monday morning, March 15th at 10 o'clock to help us with the deed transfer. I watched Vicky and Daniel exchange a look. Quick, victorious, pleased. That night, I heard champagne bottles popping, heard them celebrating their supposed triumph, and while they toasted their future in my house, I lay in bed, calm and focused, because on Sunday night, March 14th, at exactly midnight, I called a 24-hour locksmith service. I need every lock in my house changed, I told him. Tonight, I'll pay triple your normal rate. He arrived 90 minutes later, a man in his 40s with a toolbox and a knowing look. Family trouble? He asked quietly. The worst kind. He worked in silence while Daniel and Vicky slept upstairs, oblivious. Front door, back door, garage, every entrance. Around 2:30 in the morning, he handed me 4 sets of new keys. All done, ma'am. The old keys won't work anymore. These are the only ones. I paid him $450 in cash. If anyone asks, you were never here. He smiled sadly. I've done this job before, ma'am. I understand. Good luck. After he left, I sat in my dark living room, holding those keys, and felt power returning to my hands for the first time in months. I called Victor. It's done. Everything's ready. Excellent. I'll arrive at 6:30 tomorrow morning through the back door, just as we planned. Are you ready for this? More than ready. Good. Tomorrow you take your life back. And that brings us back to where we started, doesn't it? To that morning at 6:07 when my door shook under a sledgehammer, when my daughter-in-law screamed that my house belonged to them, when my son thought he could force his way into property he'd already decided was his. But when that door opened and they saw Victor Hayes standing beside me, when they realized their plan had collapsed, when Daniel's weapon fell from his hands and their faces drained of color, that was the moment everything changed. The confrontation that followed was brutal in its clarity. Victor presented the trust documents. I played the recordings. Vicky and Daniel turned on each other like drowning people fighting over a life raft. They had 48 hours to leave. The $12,000 had to be repaid in 30 days, or I'd press criminal fraud charges. But here's what I want you to understand. When Daniel dropped to his knees on that porch, crying and begging for forgiveness, I felt no satisfaction. When Vicky screamed about having nowhere to go, I felt no triumph. When they finally packed their belongings and drove away on March 17th, leaving me standing alone in my reclaimed house, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Over the next 3 months, I slowly brought my house back to life. I repainted the walls their original peach color, spending a whole weekend on it just like Richard and I had done decades ago. I sewed new curtains with the bird pattern my grandmother had taught me. I hung Richard's photographs everywhere, on the mantel, in the hallway, beside my bed. I bought new vinyl records to replace the ones that had been thrown away, and every Sunday afternoon I played them, swaying alone in my kitchen to Miles Davis and remembering. I joined an art class at the community center and met other women my age, women who'd survived betrayal, divorce, loss, manipulation. We formed something stronger than a class. We became a support system, reminding each other that we were still ourselves, not just mothers or daughters or wives, but complete human beings with value beyond what we could give to others. And then, one afternoon in June, when the violets Richard loved were blooming in my front yard, my phone rang with an unknown number. Grandma? Sophia's voice was small, hesitant. Sweetheart, how are you? Not great, she paused. Mom and Dad got divorced. Mom left. She found some other guy with money. Dad was right about her all along, Grandma. She never loved any of us. She only wanted the house. My heart ached for this child caught in the wreckage of adult greed. I'm so sorry, honey. We're living in a tiny apartment now, just me and Marcus and Dad. It's really small and kind of sad. But Grandma, I'm not calling to ask to come back or anything. I just wanted to hear your voice and tell you were right about everything. And I'm sorry we were part of hurting you. Tears filled my eyes. You can visit me anytime you want, Sophia. This will always be your home. The house is in a trust for you and Marcus. Did you know that? Really? Her voice brightened slightly. That's really nice, Grandma. Thank you. After we hung up, I sat with that phone call for a long time. Daniel had lost everything. His marriage, his scheme, his mother's unconditional trust. Vicky had moved on to her next victim, and I had survived. But survival isn't the same as healing, is it? Here's what I learned through all of this. Love without respect eventually becomes a chain that binds you to people who don't value you. Family isn't always safe. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is set a boundary so firm that the people who've hurt you finally understand. You are not a doormat, not a resource to be exploited, not a problem to be managed. You are a human being with dignity, worth, and the absolute right to protect yourself. So now I want to ask you something, and I really want you to think about this. If you were in my position, would you have had the courage to fight back? Would you have been able to look your own child in the eye and say, "No more"? Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you loved, knowing it might end that relationship forever? Because here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us most are the ones who hurt us worst, and recognizing that, accepting it, and choosing yourself anyway, that's not selfish. That's survival. That's strength. That's self-love in its purest form. I'm 61 years old. I live alone in a house filled with memories of a man who truly loved me. I have friends who understand what it means to rebuild after betrayal. I have grandchildren who know this door is always open to them. And I have peace, hard-won, battle-scarred, absolutely earned peace. But what about you? What's your story? Have you ever been manipulated by someone you trusted? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping your dignity? Drop your story in the comments below, because I promise you this. Your experience, your pain, your triumph, it matters. Someone out there needs to hear it. Someone out there is in the situation I was in 3 months ago, wondering if they're crazy, if they're selfish, if they're wrong to feel hurt. Your story could be the permission they need to save themselves. And if you found strength in my story, if it helped you see that you deserve better than exploitation disguised as love, then do me a favor. Share this video. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Because there are thousands of people out there right now being slowly erased by the people who claim to care about them. And they need to know they're not alone. They need to know that fighting back is possible. They need to know that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred. Leave a comment right now telling me, what boundary do you need to set today? What relationship do you need to reevaluate? What version of yourself are you ready to reclaim? Because the woman who opened that door on March 15th wasn't the same woman who'd welcomed her son into her home 3 months earlier. She was stronger, wiser, and finally understood that true love never requires you to destroy yourself, and neither should yours. Thank you for listening to my story.